I have been hesitant to send this information along, but I feel that you may be able to shed some light on the situation. Back in the summer of 2000, I worked as a backcountry ranger for Yosemite National Park. My first season there was by myself, and on this particular night, another single ranger's car had been broken down at Crane Flats, so I drove down there to meet her and escort her back up. We worked our way through the darkness in my 4Runner until we reached Highway 120, where by this time, it was around 11 p.m. at night. I had turned on my headlights to aid in seeing the rough terrain as we made our way along when, suddenly, a large object appeared right beside us, only about 10 yards away and moving fast. It was huge and dark, with no real definitive shape, but looked like a large upright dog or wolf running through the trees alongside of us. I slowed as we approached an open area where this thing stopped and stood in full view. It was huge, easily twice my height, which is 6'2", with a large chest. I do remember that it had back legs and front paws, but I could not see its face as there was not much light giving off from the moon. It stood there, staring at us while we were at a complete stop. To say it was terrifying is a complete understatement. My ranger companion had no idea what she saw. It was too dark to make out any more distinct features, but it stood there on 2 legs. It took a step off the road and disappeared into the brush as we drove away from that area as fast as we could. It was a very strange night, but I wonder if this could have been the same creature that she had run across near Tuolumne Meadows. That area is miles from here. Now trust me, I've seen black bears, mountain lions, and deer in that area all the time at night, so it was nothing unusual to see wildlife out there. But this situation is very different. I've been back to that area a few times in the dark since then. I've never experienced anything like it again, but some things are still there, such as my hair standing up on the back of my neck when I'm in the area, especially if it's after dark. That night was so out of place from anything else that has happened to me while working in the park. I've thought about it many times over the years, and I can't help but wonder what if there is some sort of large alpha predator running around in the area? Perhaps just what if, everything acts as a viable food source for this thing? This is the most unbelievable account of a sighting that I have ever heard, and I'm humbled to be able to tell it. A lady came to me recently, and before I knew it, we were lost in conversation, and she was telling me all about her encounter with the unknown. She stated that during an early summer evening in 1993, she had gone out on her front porch to watch the sunset as she was sitting down with a glass of red wine, when all at once, there were about 15 or 20 bright lights appearing in the sky above her house and all around her property. She said she thought it was the police at first, not really sure how to rationalize this sudden explosion of light, but then noticed they were not moving or making any noise whatsoever. She stood up out of fear when she noticed that the lights were not moving, then looked down to see if she could pick up any reflection of light. She states that when her eyes came back up towards the area where the lights were, she noticed there were now several strange crafts all around, and appeared to be flying beings moving around. Incredibly frightened, she ran to her house, locking all the doors behind her. She then went to a window in an upstairs bedroom to try and get a better look, hiding in the safety of her home. She stated that when she looked out the window, there were beings by her trees in front of her house, as well as by her vehicles in the driveway. She explained they were extremely tall, very muscular, and pale-skinned with what appeared to be dark hair on their bodies. She became even more frightened before she realized they were looking in her windows and walking around now. She then ran down to the first floor of the house into the dining room and became even more frightened when she realized they were trying to get in the house. She states that she could not tell if they were male or female, but just knew that there was something different about them other than their height and physical appearance. Incredibly scared, not knowing where else to turn, she sat down at the table and began to pray. She said once she did this, all the beings disappeared into thin air. She ran right back to the upstairs to look out the other window and saw that the crafts and the beings had all but vanished. She sat up in her bed all night long, watching out her window for any signs of them returning, but she never did. She said that she went to the sheriff's office about her sighting, but was told that there were no reports of any strange lights or aircrafts in the area. She said she is convinced otherwise, but will never be able to prove what she saw. She is also a very religious woman, and said that if it was the devil or his demons who came for her, then God must want something from her, because they have come back to bother her several times since this first encounter. She believes it is a test of faith, and I convinced her not to be afraid because God was with her the whole time. She seemed somewhat comforted by that. I asked her if she would be willing to tell me the details of what happened, and after some convincing from my side, she was glad to share it with me. It was a humbling experience, and I'm convinced there is something other than us out there. This happened approximately 12 years ago on the Navajo Nation. At the time, I was 23 years old, lived in a small house on the west side. My mother at the time was visiting, and we were sleeping when I woke up to see a dark figure standing by my open window, looking in on the inside. I was so frightened that my first instinct was to hide under the blanket. My mother woke up and asked what it is, and at the time, whatever it was jumped off the porch, running off into the night. My mother got up and turned on the light to see if there was anything at my window, but found nothing. We did not sleep that night because we were so frightened. Years later, I was visiting my sister in Farmington, and she told me that her daughter had been having a strange dream where something dark would come into her room at night while sleeping. I told her that I too had a very similar experience, and it might be related to what had been seen at my house. Later, we asked the daughter about her dreams, but she said nothing out of the ordinary came of it. A few days later, the daughter told us about her dreams. She said that something dark was coming into her room, and she would wake up screaming for help. My sister called me over to discuss this with me, and I told her that this may have even been what happened to us years ago. Her daughter also said she would see something standing by the window looking in at her. Something ghoulish, something evil looking. I have to wonder if this was a skinwalker trying to find me, but mistook my window of my sister's house instead. Maybe it thought I lived there. First off, I don't know exactly what I'm dealing with here, but I'm still frightened by what had transpired back in October. I have never told anyone about this, not even my wife. About 3 weeks ago, I really got the feeling that I needed to share this, and so I felt compelled to start getting this out there to the public. For as long as I can remember, growing up in northern Minnesota, I've always had a fascination with the woods. My parents would take my sister and me camping quite often, especially during hunting season in the late fall. I was raised to respect nature and all of its wonders, flora and fauna. I was always told to be cautious of bears, wolves, bobcats, as they could pose a threat if you were not careful. After all, it's about respect. Did I say bobcats? Silly me. I meant cougars. So, needless to say, when the incident took place, I should have been more prepared for what was to come. For starters, I live in a small town, population a little less than 1,000. It's also on the edge of a state forest, which is pretty large. I had just gotten off work around midnight and was heading home. I prefer driving at night. It is less hectic than during the day. As I am cruising down the main road in town towards my home, I notice an animal on the side of the road. At first glance, it looked like a large dog or maybe even a wolf, because it had long grayish-brown hair and was quite tall. It was hunched over and appeared to be eating something. As I got closer, it seemed as if the animal looked up towards my headlights, and I could see that its lights and eyes reflected. But they were not red like a cat or dog. They were an eerie yellowish-green color. It began to do something terrifying. It stood up on its hind legs and began moving towards my car. Its front hands or paws were long, like they had fingers. It was incredibly disturbing. I slowed down even more so that I could get a better look at this thing. It was now walking on the side of my car, sniffing and moving its head towards the window. I drove by, and I could see that its head was not proportioned to its body. It looked deformed, hunched over like an old man with a very long neck, but no tail. It had a large snout and pointed ears. It did not look like a dog the more I looked at it. It looked like a very deformed deer. As I drove further away from it, my heart began to beat faster as the fear truly set in. My mind was racing because this animal looked like no other that I'd ever seen before. Over the next few weeks, I would drive around in hopes of finding this creature again, so maybe I can get evidence. I never saw it again, but there have been reports of a large bear-like animal in this area, killing livestock. For starters, I'm a Native American male. I've been raised and lived on the Navajo Indian Reservation my whole life. My family is very traditional when it comes to our beliefs in skinwalkers or witches. I've always been taught to believe that they are very real and can shift into any animal. When I was younger, my family would tell me stories of them, seeing one or hearing strange noises at night, but I never believed them. Well, I'm starting to believe after what happened tonight. My family and I live in a small 2-story house, with my parents downstairs and me upstairs on the 2nd floor. I had just gotten home from work. I was tired, beat up, and was walking in the house, but right before I did, something caught my eye. There was a black figure on all fours, maybe about 15 to 20 feet away from the front door, just out of view, and I caught it. But it wasn't moving. It appeared to be staring in my direction, kind of like a dog would with the head tilted to one side. I froze for a second, then immediately ran into the house, locking the door. I looked out the window and saw it transform into an enormous black dog with wisps of smoke and black coming off of it. You'll never believe of what I saw. It had red eyes that seemed to glow in the moonlight. I called some friends over to see if they can help keep me company, but by the time they got there, it was gone. I don't know what I saw, but I know it wasn't a skinwalker. This almost seemed like a hellhound, if you know what I'm talking about. This had to have been something else. Either way, I'm still shook up about it. One of my great aunts was known for being a witch and doing black magic, but she died before I was born. And as it turns out, A lot of the issues that came with her hobby and lifestyle followed my family around. My great-grandmother, who was my namesake and the oldest member of our family, passed away just a few years ago at the age of 96, on her bed with all 7 of her children sitting around the room with her. She was also well known for being a witch. It's possible that she called one of these entities in before passing, and the rest are hanging out, looking for something to take over their role, or maybe just watching to see what happens. I also don't know if there's entities around my family's home and life that watch over us like a guardian would. My great-great-grandfather was also a shaman, but he also died long before I was born, and his burial site is on the other side of the large piece of property that my family owns. I don't really talk about it much, but boy oh boy, I get the heebie-jeebies every time I go over there. Like you could just tell there's a sinister energy in the air. I don't know if all these things are related, but either way, it's really creeped me out.